Good morning, podcast listeners. This is Ed Franklin with the Ed Franklin No Limits podcast. This is Raising 10, episode 22. Remember, you can always get a hold of me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com. If you know somebody who would be a good guest or you'd like to be a guest, does not have to be about raising children. That's why we call it the No Limits podcast. And that's not how the podcast started anyway, about kids. But we can talk about just about anything, leadership, sales, whatever you want to talk about, or just life in general. About maybe you have something you want to promote. That's fine with me too. If you have written a book or something, that'd be great. Um, you can get me on all my social media channels. And if you go to YouTube and watch this, physically watch it, just hit subscribe button when you're there. It doesn't cost anything. You're not going to get emails or anything like that. Just hit subscribe and it helps me out with my algorithms. Speaking of technology, today we're going to talk about AI in a kind of a different light than I've talked about it before. We had an expert on a while back that talked about AI and his dim view of how it was going to affect children in the future. And actually, what I want to talk about today is not super positive, but it's just something for you that are people that are raising kids right now or have grandkids, something we need to watch out for. So, going back in my life, one of the hardest time for any of us is middle school. And I have a granddaughter that's in middle school now and other kids that are coming up that'll be in middle school soon, grandkids. And I was starting to think the other day, it's hard enough to talk about to our parents about things if we have a burning question in our mind. And of course, when we were 13, 14, 11, 12, 13 years old, when we were in middle school, a lot of things are coming up, right? Hormones are racing. You're starting to get into relationships. And I'll tell you a quick thing. I go to the gym every morning, almost every morning. And depending on the time I go, whether it's 5 in the morning, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in the morning, the later it gets in the morning, the more people that are on their phones. And this is not just kids, this is adults too. They'll do a set, get on their phone, do a set, get on their phone. And they're constantly on their phone looking at something or changing channel, whatever they're doing on their phones, they're on them. And I know when my kids come over at times and the grandkids too, that they get on some kind of social media or they're watching, an iPad or their phone or whatever. And I was starting to think about, do we really know what the kids are looking at when they're on their devices? When I pick up my granddaughter from school, all the kids are on their phones, looking at their phones, doing social media, communicating with other people. I don't know what they're doing when they're on their phones. But it started this burning question. Are we going to have these fatherless societies, motherless societies later when the parents aren't answering questions? They're not communicating with their kids. I There's so many times I'll see families at an event and they're all on their phones at the same time. And they're spending more and more emotional time with their phones, kids are. Even though the parents are sitting right next to them, the parents are usually on the phones too. And so they feel like they're being present, but they're really not because the kid is going on there. Now, I guess you'd call it a relationship with AI. I use it daily. I usually use it for marketing tools and things like that. I don't have personal conversations with AI necessarily, but I had watched a young man speak a couple of years ago, about 30 years old. He was at a wedding and he didn't have a date. And someone was asking him, why don't you have a date? And it was kind of bothering him. So he went home and he started this conversation with AI. And he said it went on for about an hour before why he went for a walk and he was just talking to AI about relationships. Now, who knows where this information's coming from? Nobody knows. But I kind of think of it like a gang, how gangs get kids involved. Maybe the dad's not in the picture or, they're having problems at home and these kids start to friend these other kids that are in gangs and these gangs start giving them the needs that they have, right? They're communicating with them, they're encouraging them, they're giving them money if they need it, they're doing all these things. And of course, in turn, it's going to be that kid joining that gang possibly and starting to do things that are not in the best interest of society. And that's how these gang members get new members, right? They find these lonely kids, they find whoever they can that they think they want to, wear gold watches and all these things so they can sell little bags of things and make money. But AI is becoming really the default mentor for your kids. So if they have a burning question, let's say about sex, for instance, and they're 12 or 13 years old and they're embarrassed to ask their parents, well, now we have access to AI where they could go on and ask AI a question. Now, the answer they get may or may not be in line with your, moral code or your religion or a lot of different things. But AI is good at starting a relationship. So when I go on my phone and click on Copilot, it says, "Hello, Ed. What are we diving into today?" So it starts to act like a human being, and it's very positive. They don't give you very many negative, things. You can ask them questions. They'll answer it all on a positive note and all those things. And it's convenience versus connection, right? So instead of going home and asking your mom and being embarrassed or asking your dad and being embarrassed about a topic, they can just go on AI with their um, whatever it's Chat GPT or Copilot or whoever it is. Claude now is a big one, and ask AI questions and get answers that, like I said, may not align with your family values or your morals or anything like that. And it's getting worse. I mean, the AI is getting so good and so good at recognizing people's personalities and that their algorithms and their cadence and they speak and all these different things that they're starting to answer questions that you as a parent really should be answering. Um, if they're asking about, getting a job or doing all these other things, they're starting to lure your kids in. And I don't know if it's even done on purpose. It's just the way the system was built that it's going to answer questions where and the answers are going to be from wherever they collected it from. And we don't know that. I know that AI is wrong often when I go in and ask a question, especially at my age. I know that they're giving me answers that aren't valid. And I know that at some level, they're letting kids use AI in school. Now, not to do homework or things like that, but if they're researching something and they're going online, whether it's Google or not, and they're asking it a question, asking the system a question, it's going to give them the answer that they've, downloaded all this information. It's really emotional outsourcing, right? Kids are turning to tech before they're turning to their parents. They're going to go online and ask that question before they ask the parent. Now, I put some things in the other day, just but prior to developing this podcast, some questions about people I knew in my life, right? And I got some interesting answers. Now, some of the answers I would not want my children getting those answers to about certain people. It wasn't me. It was other people that are no longer with us that are doing this or that. And AI continues to ask questions like an attorney almost until they drill down and find out what you're kind of looking for to find out. Parents are overwhelmed. I mean, I know I had 8 kids. I have 8 kids, and when the kids were younger, it was tough. It was, you got sports, you got work, you got dinner, you got homework, you have all these things, and they're just overstimulated. The parents are, and then now they're at work using AI. Leaders are dealing with this AI thing because a lot of employees are using AI to answer questions, and it's not necessarily what the leader had in mind to continue that culture that they want to have. They may have a culture in mind, and like I said, AI may not be giving the answers that they want. And instead of thinking it through and doing critical thinking, they're just going to AI and getting something. And why being in the room is just isn't the same as being available. If there's 5 people in your family and you're all in the living room and you're all on, TikTok or YouTube or all these different, Instagram, Facebook, you're all on these things. Just because you're in the room doesn't mean you're present, right? If you're not having a conversation with them about a topic, they could be looking it up online and getting the information you don't want them to have. And it's kind of how kids interpret absence, even when it's unintentional. If mom and dad got to work or they got to go to a PTA meeting or something like that, they don't necessarily interpret that as being important if you're not there with them, right? All they know is their parents aren't there. And it's not really your fault, but this is where that communication piece comes in, and you have to tell them why you're not there and what you're doing that's in the best interest of them and your family as a whole. Um, where the future, if we don't step in, is going to be a generation raised by algorithms instead of adults. I'm telling you, it's getting worse and worse and worse. And I have to put more restriction on my granddaughter's phone because I don't know what she's watching. I can't hover over her every 5 minutes. And in her defense, I'm on social media all day. I use it for marketing. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm using it for marketing. I'm putting out content. I do this podcast, and then I, have to go through this podcast and edit it and do all these things, and then post it on, social media platforms. So I'm probably more guilty than anybody in our house. However, I don't have young kids around me all the time watching what I'm doing, and I don't go on. I'm never on my phone at the gym. I listen to specific things at the gym, and once I turn on my phone, I don't ever change it. So this is something we really got to worry about. And I think families are losing their culture and their rhythm and their identity because of this, because of social media and because of AI. You can go in an AI and build the perfect parent. That won't be you, by the way, when the kids build that perfect parent. They can find through AI someone that's going to always tell them yes. And we've talked about this before. It's not always good to tell your kids yes. And they can justify anything through AI. And this is where I think sometimes parents and kids start losing their relationship together because the child is getting the answers they want from AI, and you're giving them answers they don't want all the time because you're a parent. You're trying to do what's in the best interest of your kids. This emotional resilience is just dropping. I mean, they don't have everybody's turning into a robot. And if you're talking to AI on a regular basis, you're going to start to talk like AI does as a child. And they're very impressionable, as you know. So it's super, super important to stay engaged with your kids and communicate verbally. Get outside, go for hikes, go shoot baskets, go do something and put those phones down. I mean, it's so much different than when my kids were growing up. They had phones, but social media wasn't anything when they might text their friend, and we had rules about how long they could be on their phone and things like that too. Some of these video games that are out there are super dangerous for kids about the violence and everything else. And it's funny, even if you sign on to one of these games, and I'm not a gamer, I don't even know how to play any of this stuff. I don't even know how to get it up on a screen. But if you do, it'll ask, "Are you 18?" And you click yes. Okay. They don't check it. They don't come to your house and do an ID check. And if they ask for a birthday, if your kid can do any kind of math, then they just do that. 15 minutes of intentional connection beats 3 hours of proximity. If you can sit down with your child for 15 minutes and have a conversation without any phones, that's going to beat, being around for 3 hours, not doing anything, right? Just sitting there watching. I, you know, Actually, let me inject something in there. I don't think it's either better if you're even watching TV all the time. We don't watch TV very often. So if you're sitting there engulfed in a movie and maybe the kids aren't interested in that movie and they have their phones out, well, guess where they're at? They're in AI world. And now you think you're having a family movie night and your kids are getting answers to questions that they can't ask you because they're embarrassed. That could be your fault. That could have been my fault that I would make my kids feel embarrassed if they asked me a question, or something we never did with our kids. And we really were adamant about this was making fun of them in relationships. Like if they had a boyfriend or girlfriend, we wouldn't kid about that because first of all, it's just kind of mean. It's kind of bullying. And we didn't want to do that. And just because it was something that maybe their friends would do, and we never wanted to do that and embarrass our children. I would never joke about my kids in front of other kids or other people because it was embarrassing to them, and I just was not going to embarrass them. Setting tech boundaries uh, without being anti-tech is, you got to learn about this stuff. I know people that tell me, I hate AI. I don't want to get involved in it. I don't want to learn about it. Well, your kids are learning about it in school and from their friends, and they grew up with it. So you need to be a little bit tech savvy to know what they can do with their phones. What what the outreach can be. I mean, you can get anything off of AI. I think there's some moral boundaries, or at least with some of the better ones, better AI, like Chat GPT and thing. I think they have some boundaries. But keep in mind, there's 100 AI companies out there that are giving information to your kids. And like I said, you don't know where it's coming. It's not all the same AI, right? They're getting different information. Modeling leadership, calm, and identity in a chaotic world. We've talked about this before. Your attitude, what your kids are seeing you act like, and what you're doing. This is a big deal. And the AI proof home, you really need that. You really need something that's going to monitor what they're watching and what they're asking AI to do. And if, there's no real way to record it or anything that I know of, and, you have to be give your kids some privacy, but we also have to be in their business a little bit. And that's just the way it is. You just have to be. You have to be asking questions, finding out from their friends, finding out from teachers what's going on. And in California, if you're not in California, they have passed laws that kind of taken the power away from children, from adults, and given it to a child that's 12 or 13 years old. If they get into some bind or something, they're able to go out and basically emancipate themselves from you, and with certain decisions that are very life-changing decisions. I'm not going to get into that, but you can look up, things that they've passed, and what the implications can be for your kids if they go to the state or go to a teacher or go to a family friend. They can do things that you don't want done to your kids because the kid feels like this is something they want to do. And talk about that with genders and things like that. You have to imagine that AI is very 72 gender friendly, right? That they're very liberal. And if that's not your household culture, you're going to get your kids learning things from a so-called expert because they're thinking it's AI. Remember the old joke, if it's on the internet, it's true. They're going to be getting information that they think is true and valid. And you're just too old to understand kind of attitude. I get that from my grandson sometimes when we're talking about marketing and things. He always has input, which sometimes it's really good input about how I'm marketing my podcast and things like that, and how my backgrounds and stuff like that. But I don't listen to him all the time, obviously. I have my own ways, and I use AI to help with marketing, and I talk to people and find out, hey, how did you do this? How do you do that? So I can get a full range of, input on what I'm thinking about, what I'm talking about. So I think that parents, grandparents, you really need to be concerned about the time kids are spending on. And listen, you can do what you want. This is my opinion. I raised 8 kids, not during tech savvy times. Do whatever you want. You're not going to, doesn't, it does bother me, but it's your business and you have to raise your kids the way you raise your kids. I just feel like you need to be real conscientious about how much time your kids are spending on AI. Think about if the kids were asking, back to the sex question, if they were asking particular questions about sex or about relationships, or you have no idea what the answer they're going to get from AI versus the answer you would give them. I'm not insinuating that you are all prudes, but I am telling you that an answer from AI versus an answer from a parent is going to be 180 degrees out. You're not going to believe the answers you get on AI. And I would tell you this, if you use AI for anything, go on there and ask questions that you think maybe a 13-year-old would ask, and tell them why you're asking it. I mean, type in why you're asking the question and it'll give you some information. Might be wrong. You're going to have to be, smart enough to figure out what's right and what's wrong. But um, I recommend you do that. I'd recommend you go on the internet, go to Google, ask questions on Google, and see what the answers you're getting, because those are the ones your kids are going to be getting. I can tell you that AI is so smart, is so intelligent, that it can tell if they're talking to a 13-year-old or a 33-year-old or a 63-year-old like I am. because of the way you frame your questions and things like that. It's that smart to figure out what you're doing. Um, this is really, it's not anti-tech, it's just really a wake-up call. Because if we don't step back into the center of our kids' lives and their algorithms, then will, excuse me, if we don't step back into our kids' life, their algorithms will. The questions they're asking, they'll start posing answers compared to their history. And I know that sounds crazy, but if I go onto my Copilot, which I use every day, I use it every day, and ask a question, it remembers my answers from before, right? Whether it's an address or a phone number, I'm doing a cover letter or I'm doing an email. I have several different tasks that I'm doing right now, and all I have to do is mention the task's name, like the Ed Franklin No Limits Collective, and it will retrieve all that information that we've talked about before. And if you don't think that they're doing that to your kids, you're out of your mind. You need to pay attention to what's going on. Um, you can build an AI proof home. We use Alexa often. If we're putting things on a grocery list or we want to know the weather or something, and it recognizes our names. In fact, I just as a funny thing, I changed our names on there. And if you ask Alexa who you're talking to, it'll give you the funny name that I typed in there. And I've noticed that in the last maybe 6 or 8 months, when we ask a question to Alexa, not necessarily a question, if we say we need something on a shopping list, it will continue to talk. It will say, and I always kid about it that it won't shut up. We'll get notifications that say, "Hey, Ed, you haven't ordered this in a while. Do you want to order it again?" But maybe it's some kind of thing you order on a regular basis. So it's smart. I mean, whoever developed AI, and it's been around forever, a lot longer than you think. It's just gotten smarter and smarter and smarter, and people are losing jobs because of it, and people are gaining jobs because of it. I don't think it's evil, but I think we have to pay attention to what's going on. Um, we need to have families that are led by real people, not machines, right? This is kind of Twilight Zone stuff where we could have heard about this, 50 or 60 years ago and said, nah, that'll never happen. Well, it happened and it's here and it's getting better and it's getting bigger. And it's going to be to a point where you're using chatbots more often than you're talking to people, which drive me crazy, by the way. Some of the tech companies I deal with for my podcast, for some of the programs I have, it's easy to get a live person on the phone. Some of them, you never get a live person on the phone. And to try to frame a question, uh, maybe I'll tell you what, you try to frame a question on the DMV website or the EDD website, and if you're not framing that question just right, you're going to go round and round and round in circles before you can get somebody on the phone. And any of you that have tried to call the DMV or a government agency, you could be on the phone for hours on hold, waiting for a live person to come on. You know, it's becoming the voice of shaping identity, confidence, and emotional habits. We have to let our kids grow up and not with a machine telling them what to do. It's scary, man. I really believe it's needs to be addressed, and we need to come up with some kind of. I would hate to get the government involved, but we need to come up with some parameters of what AI companies can put out there. Now, that's a slippery slope too, because now are you talking about morality? Or what are you talking about? When I was growing up, I knew a lot of kids with different religions, and we had different beliefs about things. Still do. I have adult friends that have different beliefs about stuff that I believe about. If you think about the Catholic Church, there's statistical information that says about 70% of Catholics are in Protestant churches. Now, the only reason they would go to a Protestant church is because they disagreed with something the Catholic Church was doing. And I'm not going to get into the things they do and they don't do, but you see how things can change. If I'm running AI and I'm a Catholic and I'm going to give it answers that are only, based on the beliefs of the Catholicism, then you're not going to be getting information based on what you believe in. And is that what you want? Do you want a politician, for instance, answering questions versus a clergy person or your mom or dad? Do you really want, you know, some of these politicians we have in the United States giving you advice? You don't. And you don't want your kids getting that advice from somebody you don't know either. One of my podcasts earlier talked about, are you raising your kids, or coaches, leaders, teachers, you know, bosses, are they raising your kids, or are you raising your kids? Well, those are people are easier to control than AI is, because you can get AI anywhere, on your phone, on your watch, on your computer, on all these different places. And I know I think I beat the thing to death at this point, but I'm just concerned that we're not paying attention enough, and it's going to be too late when we do start paying attention. Tell you, I am not an expert, believe me. I think kids spend more time on their screens than they do with the people raising them. And if that's not true in your household, congratulations. But remember, if your kids are school age, if they're elementary, middle school, or high school, they're only with you in person after school until they go to bed. That's really the only time they're with you. So the rest of the time, they could be laying in bed on their phones. I don't know. They could be on their phones at school during lunch, and all these other times. If you work till 5 o'clock and your kid gets out at 3, there's another 2 hour window they have with screen time. I just think they're getting too much FaceTime with the screen, and not nice conversations at home. I told you before that I drive my granddaughter to school, and when I took my kids to school, we always had a nice conversation on the drive. It was important. That was important because she's not on her phone, because I'd tell her to get off of it if she was. And I'm not on my phone, obviously, because I'm trying to drive. And those are really important times in our life. My friend Scott Shepard, who was on the podcast, talked about getting outside, going on hikes, going fishing. My son's good about this. He gets his kids outside, doesn't give them screen time. Very little if he gives them any, and he's monitoring like a hawk. Um, this is important. Get outside. Do something other than being on your phone all day. He posted something on LinkedIn today about how some schools are using AI to help the kids study and things like that. Well, do we really want to encourage kids to be on AI? I don't think you do. Like I said, I use it a copious amount. I mean, I'm using it all the time, but I'm not using it for bad stuff. I'm using it for, like I said, marketing. Maybe I'm writing something. Maybe I'm asking how to phrase a question or something like that. Now, I'm not saying it's okay for me and not for you. I'm saying your kids need to have some guidance. They just need a little supervision. And I have some notes over here. It says AI isn't just helping with homework or entertainment anymore. It's becoming the voice and shaping an identity. It's not just what you think they're using it for. I know it'd be nice, but it's just not the way it is. So anyway, I beat the thing to death. Got some great shows coming up. I really appreciate you listening. Remember, if you're on my YouTube channel, please subscribe while you're there. Keep listening. I really appreciate it. My views are way up again, and my algorithm's working. You can contact me at edfranklin.nolimits@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on any of my social media platforms. And like I said, if you have a guest, or you'd like to be a guest, or you want to promote a book, or you want to promote anything, just hit me up. We'll see if it works. And I do everything via Zoom, so you don't have to go anywhere. You can sit in your office, in your home, in your wherever, and you can get on my podcast. So again, thank you for listening. Go to my website, edfranklinnolimits.com. I just redid a bunch of it, and it's working. It's, again, um, asking AI to help, look at my website and things like that. If you have a business, it's probably not a bad idea to have them review your website. A lot of times people get a website and they don't change it for a couple of years. Well, things are changing every couple of months. So if we don't back our kids, if we don't step back into the center of our kids' lives, algorithms will. I said that again. If we don't get back involved with our kids and help them with their lives, in the center of their lives, algorithms will help them. And I don't think you want that to happen. Anyway, thanks for listening. I'll have another podcast next week. Have a great weekend. It's May 1st. Enjoy the weekend, and I'll talk to all of you very soon.